Snowstorm rages over the Montana territory. Through the swirling white, a woman stumbles barefoot, clutching her 3 shivering daughters. Her face is bruised, lips trembling, eyes darting back as if someone is chasing them. Distant sound of horse hooves approaches, and a deep voice cuts through the wind. "You're coming with me." Montana territory, late 1800s, where winters cut deeper than any blade and the wind howls like a warning from the mountains. In this land of frozen rivers and endless white, survival is a battle fought every single day, and for women the fight is twice as hard. Anna knows this truth better than anyone. She is a young mother of 3 little girls, their tiny faces pale from the cold, their hands raw from working far beyond their years. In a world where sons are prized and daughters are burdens, her husband treats them as nothing more than mouths to feed and reasons to hate her. His words are sharp, his fists sharper, and each passing day brings new bruises and deeper fear. Yet tonight, as the snow swirls like ghosts around their small cabin, Anna feels something she hasn't felt in years, a desperate, dangerous spark of escape. Her heart pounded beneath the thin fabric of her dress as the sound of his boots scraped against the wooden floor. Each step a cruel reminder of the life she had been forced into, each shadow cast by the flickering lamp stretching long and sharp against the walls like the claws of some unseen predator. And when he entered, the bitter smell of whiskey on his breath wrapped around her like a noose. He didn't speak at first, only stared at her with those cold, accusing eyes before muttering words that cut deeper than the bruises already blooming across her arms, blaming her yet again for the crime of giving him nothing but daughters, as if the innocence in their small, trembling faces was something to be ashamed of. He kicked over the stool where her youngest had been sitting, sending the child sprawling with a soft cry. And when Anna rushed to lift her, his hand struck her so hard her vision blurred, the room spinning while her daughters clung to her skirts in terrified silence. Dinner remained untouched on the table, the bread hard from neglect. But he didn't care. He grabbed the plate and hurled it against the wall, shards scattering across the floor like pieces of the life she once dreamed of. He barked orders for the girls to stay quiet, to be invisible, and when they whimpered in fear, his anger grew hotter, his voice rising to a dangerous edge that made Anna's stomach twist. In the cold outside, the wind rattled the shutters, snow piling higher against the door as if the land itself wanted to trap them. Inside this prison. And in that moment she knew the walls were closing in. She had endured his cruelty for years, telling herself it was for the girls' safety, that keeping a roof over their heads was worth the pain. But now she saw the truth in the way her eldest eyes had lost their light, in the way her middle child flinched at the sound of heavy steps, in the way the youngest clung to her even in sleep. That night, when the storm's howl drowned the sound of her quiet sobs, he came at her again, fists heavy, rage spilling like wildfire, and the taste of blood filled her mouth though she tried to swallow it down. The children huddled in the corner, their small bodies shaking, and as she looked at them through the haze of pain, something inside her shifted. A fierce, unyielding resolve took root, stronger than fear, stronger than the cold, stronger than him. She realized that staying meant not just the end of her, but the end of them, their laughter, their childhood, their hope. And in that instant she made a silent promise that she would break free of this life, no matter the cost, no matter the storm waiting outside, because the greater storm was already here, standing in front of her with clenched fists and hollow eyes. The moment his heavy snores finally filled the cabin, she moved like a shadow, her breath shallow, her hands trembling as she reached for the threadbare blankets piled in the corner. One by one she lifted her daughters from the cold floor, wrapping each in worn fabric that smelled faintly of smoke, pressing them close to her chest to share what little warmth she had. And without allowing herself to think of what might happen if he woke, she eased open the door. The wind roared in like a living thing, stinging her face and stealing her breath, but she stepped into it, pulling the girls with her, the snow already swallowing their feet. The world beyond the cabin was nothing but white and darkness, the moon a faint blur behind swirling clouds. Yet every step she took was certain because going back was no longer an option. The crust of bread in her pocket felt like a fragile lifeline, though she knew it would not last till morning, and still she pressed forward, her ears straining for any sound over the blizzard's cry. Somewhere behind her the distant crack of wood broke through the wind, followed by the bark of dogs, deep and urgent, and her pulse leapt as she gripped her eldest's hand tighter. The girls stumbled often, their small bodies sinking into drifts, but each time she pulled them up with a strength born of desperation. The frozen air burned her lungs, her fingers numb inside thin gloves, yet she welcomed the pain, because it meant she was still moving. Then came the faint shouts, men's voices carried by the wind. Too far to see but close enough to make her heart slam against her ribs. She quickened her pace, wading through the snow until her legs ached, each stride feeling heavier, each breath a battle. The shadows of the pine trees, stretching tall and black around them like silent sentinels. The youngest began to whimper from the cold, her tiny face pressed into Anna's neck, and Anna whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep, telling them that safety lay ahead, that the night would end, that somewhere beyond the endless white there was a place where no one would hurt them again. Her boots were soaked through, toes numb and unfeeling, and still she pushed forward, glancing back only once to see the faint glow of lamplight far behind, a reminder of the prison she had left and the danger chasing her. The barking grew louder, the shouts sharper, and the cold bit deeper into her skin, but the fire in her chest burned hotter than the storm, a fierce will driving her on into the unknown, trusting that every step into the blizzard was a step away from the life that had been, slowly killing them all. The wind was howling so fiercely now that Anna could barely hear her own breath, her legs trembling from exhaustion, the weight of her youngest heavy in her arms while the other two clung to her skirts. And just as her vision began to blur from the cold, a dark shape emerged far ahead, moving slowly across the endless white. At first she thought it might be a tree swaying in the storm, but then it shifted, cutting through the snow with purpose, the sound of hooves faint yet steady, and a tall rider came into view, his silhouette growing clearer with each passing heartbeat. The man slowed his horse as his sharp eyes scanned the frozen landscape, and when they met hers, something in his gaze changed, the suspicion fading into swift concern. Anna's knees buckled and she fell forward into the snow, pulling her daughters down with her. Their cries lost in the wind, and in seconds the rider was off his horse, his boots crunching over ice as he knelt beside them. Without a word he lifted the youngest from her arms, settling her carefully against his chest, before pulling the other two close, his movements firm but not unkind, his face shadowed beneath the brim of a weathered hat. His coat smelled faintly of leather and smoke, the heat radiating from him a stark contrast to the biting cold, and his deep voice broke through the storm with a tone that allowed no argument. "You're coming with me." He guided them toward his horse, lifting each child into the saddle before helping Anna up, his gloved hand steady under her arm. Once she was seated, he mounted behind her in a single motion, wrapping his coat wide around them so the wind struck only his back, and then with a click of his tongue, the horse surged forward, its hooves breaking through the drifts with practiced strength. Anna could feel the solid rhythm of his heartbeat against her spine, the warmth of his chest shielding her from the storm, and for the first time in years, she was not alone in her fight against the cold. The rider leaned low, urging the horse faster as the distant barks and shouts faded into the storm behind them, and though Anna's body still ached and her mind swirled with fear, a fragile sense of safety began to take root, fragile yet undeniable, carried with them through the snow by the strength of a stranger who had found her when she needed it most. The horse slowed only when the dark outline of a small cabin appeared through the swirling snow, smoke curling weakly from its chimney as if fighting against the storm, and Eli swung down with practiced ease, lifting the girls into his arms one by one before helping Anna dismount. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and pine, the fire snapping low in the stone hearth, and without hesitation he knelt by it, setting the girls close to the warmth. While he reached for a kettle simmering on the edge, steam rose as he poured broth into tin cups, the rich smell filling the room, and he pressed the first cup into Anna's cold, stiffened hands, his gaze steady but unreadable. She hesitated, the years of cruelty etched into her bones making it hard to accept kindness. Yet the hunger in her daughter's eyes left her no choice, and she passed the cup to the eldest before taking one herself. Eli said little, his deep voice breaking the silence only to tell her to stretch, her hands toward the fire, his own rough fingers checking for signs of frostbite with surprising care. Outside, the wind slammed against the cabin walls, rattling the shutters, but inside there was a fragile calm, broken only by the crackle of flames and the quiet sipping of broth. Still, Anna's body remained tense, her eyes flicking to the door as if expecting it to burst open at any moment, because she knew the man she had fled would not give up easily. Eli noticed the way her gaze lingered and, though he didn't press for answers, his jaw tightened, the look of a man who had seen enough trouble to recognize it when it crossed his threshold. As the girls curled together on a pile of furs near the hearth, their eyelids heavy from warmth and exhaustion, Anna sat apart, her mind racing with thoughts of how far her husband might ride in this storm, of how quickly men like him could turn desperation into violence. Eli moved about the cabin with quiet efficiency, checking the lock on the door, adding another log to the fire, then pausing by the window to stare out into the white darkness. The storm showed no sign of easing, and yet somewhere out there, she could almost feel his presence like a shadow moving closer. Eli turned back to her, his voice calm but edged with something unspoken, telling her she and the girls could sleep without fear tonight. But Anna knew fear was not something a locked door could keep out. And though her body longed for rest, her ears strained for the sound of hoofbeats breaking through the howl of the wind. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows across the cabin walls when the wind outside began to ease, the howling replaced by a heavy, watchful silence. And in that stillness came a sound that froze Anna's breath, the slow, deliberate thud of hoofbeats crunching through the snow. Eli's head lifted instantly, his eyes narrowing toward the window as he crossed the room in 2 strides, his hand reaching for the rifle propped against the wall. The metallic click of the lever echoing in the quiet. Anna's pulse raced, her fingers instinctively finding her youngest daughter and pulling her close as the footsteps grew louder, stopping just outside the door. Then, without warning, the latch rattled. The wood shuddered and the door burst open, letting in a blast of cold that swirled snow across the floor. Framed in the doorway stood her husband, his coat crusted with ice, eyes wild with rage, and the stench of whiskey pouring off him as he took a step inside. His voice was a venomous snarl as he demanded his property back, pointing a gloved finger toward Anna and the girls, as if they were nothing more than livestock. Eli stepped forward, placing himself firmly between them, his tall frame blocking the man's advance, his voice low and steady as steel when he said, "You'll leave now, or you won't leave at all." The other man laughed, a sharp, ugly sound, spitting onto the floor before muttering curses that dripped with hatred, his hand twitching toward the knife at his belt. But Eli didn't move, his rifle leveled with an unwavering grip, his eyes cold and unblinking. For a moment, the only sounds were the fire's faint crackle and the hiss of wind through the open doorway. And then something in the intruder's expression shifted. He read the resolve in Eli's stance, the kind that didn't bluff, the kind that wouldn't hesitate. With a final string of threats, he backed out into the night, slamming the door so hard it rattled on its hinges, the hoofbeats fading into the distance until they were swallowed by the snow. Eli lowered the rifle slowly, turning to find Anna still clutching her daughters, her eyes wide with fear and disbelief. And though neither spoke, an unspoken understanding passed between them, that for tonight, the danger had been driven away, but out here in the wilderness, storms had a way of circling back. Days passed beneath a sky the color of pewter, the snow still lying deep over the land. But inside the cabin a different season had begun. The fire crackled bright, throwing golden light across the room where the girls sat in a circle on the floor, giggling as they played with scraps of cloth Eli had given them. Their laughter soft at first, then stronger, as if testing the air for safety. Anna watched them from her chair near the hearth, her hands still bearing faint bruises but her eyes calmer now, the constant weight in her chest slowly lifting. She turned to Eli, her voice low as she thanked him, but he only shook his head, a faint smile beneath the shadow of his hat as he said, "This is your home now." The words settled into her heart like a promise, one she hadn't dared to believe in for years. And in that moment she knew the storm that had ruled her life was truly over. Outside the world was still frozen, but inside there was warmth, and not just from the fire. Sometimes the greatest rescue is not from the cold, but from the loneliness it leaves behind. What would you have done in Anna's place? Tell me in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, like, share, and keep watching more tales of courage and hope at Western Stories.